the introducer announced. And I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity today to share with you some thoughts around Gurbani and its meaning for us in our daily lives. The topic that I've chosen is Awakening to Purpose, and it is being organized under the rubric of Liv, which, as a lot of you know, means absorption and or reflection. So one hope that I have is that together, as a community of seekers, we will attach our Liv to some themes and concepts from Guru Nanak's Japji Sahib to awaken to purpose, which is the topic of today's dialogue. But I might add that apart from its meaning as absorption or reflection, Liv also points to an inner orientation as opposed to Tat or Taturbazi. Gurbani speaks of both these orientations as Liv Tat to Ra hai. So another hope that I have as we reflect on Guru Nanak's Japji and try to make sense of meaning and purpose in life is that we will, in our own lives, begin to reorient ourselves away from Taturbaji, which actually, for ease of understanding, you can think of the worldly rat race that we are all engaged in, towards Liv, which is where our center should really be. Now, very quickly, why do I do this? What is my motivation? Well, first and foremost, I firmly believe that Guru Nanak's message, universal, timeless, will remain alive only if we together, collectively, successive generations, revisit it, review it, and reinterpret it through the filters of our own knowledge and experience. It has to be done over and over again. If not, we will run the risk of depriving it of its life-changing potency, and it will just degenerate into an empty ritual, which I'm afraid it has already happened. My view of conventional interpretations of the Sikh message, which we typically see coming from Gurdwara podiums, certainly leave me with a lingering sense of dissatisfaction. I mean, for one thing, the reliance there is almost exclusively on traditional forms. You can talk about hagiography or Sakhis, mythology, and the message is typically delivered in homilies in homespun Punjabi and then stamped as an authorized version of the truth to which we must all submit with unquestioning obedience. Now, I'm not suggesting that Punjabi, Sakhis, mythologies do not have a place in our collective discourse. Absolutely, they do. But I think our approach today especially also has to take into account and reflect the needs of the younger generations of Sikhs, both here and in the Punjab, in India, who are increasingly being shaped by Western modes of thinking and a scientific cultural temper that is basically very prevalent around the world and emphasizes dialectic and discussion. We just need to have an alternative to the pontificating Gurdwara sermon. So that basically is my motivation. I know that I'm not the only one who has these issues, playing in his mind. A lot of you who have joined me obviously feel the same way. So coming to the topic at hand, why did I choose to focus on purpose and meaning in life? And as I said a minute ago, the reason is very simple. It is a subject that I have struggled with for a good part of my life, and over the years what I have discovered is that it really is not my problem alone. So for all our seeming assurance and, about having goals and objectives, despite the air of confidence that we might have, despite the fact that we are ostensibly successful in what we have achieved, there is always a lingering whisper of discontent that seems to haunt us. And what I find is that at bottom, fulfillment eludes us. I speak for myself, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of people when I say that we walk around with a vacuum inside. You know, Pascal referred to it as a God-shaped vacuum in all of us. A kind of emptiness, you know, that makes us yearn for some inspiration, some passion in our lives, you know, that'll lift us beyond the pettiness of everyday living. So I know that I'm not alone in this, and that's why I chose to go with this subject today, Awakening to Purpose. And I will have you know that my engagement with Japji, which, you know, like all of you, has been more or less lifelong. But I have found that as I've grown older and as I've delved into it more and more, I find that it is an absolute unfathomable ocean. It has helped me understand quite a bit about my own self, and I thought I would share with you what I have learned. So I'm going to go to the second slide here, and I'm hoping you can see that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, VG. Can you slideshow it so that it actually shows full screen for everyone? We are able to see it, but it's slightly smaller. Thank you.
You know, seminars are one thing, but webinars are quite another. I get the feeling here that I'm talking to myself, which I'm pretty good at, but it's still a strange feeling. So focus on the foundational question, Kiv Sachiara Hoy. Again, Guru Babaji thought that it was important enough to actually talk about the universal predicament of human existence, which is, what really is my purpose in life? It is a question that is not just individual, it's very cultural, it's very modern, and it's very ancient. So Guru Nanak himself saw the need to place this question right at the very beginning of, you know, the Japji, and Guru Arjan, of course, placed it at the very start of the Guru Granth Sahib. So it's a very, it is in fact the foundational question that we all need to actually address. Now, before we get into the heart of the matter, I'm hoping here that this will not become a sermon, but become a true melding of the minds, because I would expect that you will participate with me interactively as best as possible under the circumstances, because much that I love to hear my own voice, I think like you, I'm here to sort of share and learn from you as well. So let's go to the next slide here and talk about what I think is where I personally had my first breakthrough in terms of understanding what the purpose of one's life may be. So I'll speak a little bit to each one of these topics here. You know, Hukam being the larger purpose, having a teleological direction, our obligation to be co-creators, and where does Hukam and our individual will, where is the intersection? Can we glean some of this? So, so basically, if you look at this pauri that in Japji Sahib, what Guru Nanak is saying is, he poses the question by saying, how will the truth be revealed, and how the veil of falsehood repealed? And the answer is surrender to that will. Hukam rajai chalana, Nanak likhya naal. And the fact is that this will is inscribed in all creation. And this is the answer that I think you and I should spend a few minutes trying to understand. So what exactly is Guru Nanak telling us in this pauri? Because if you know, he's listed out all the existing religious paradigms. So what he's really saying, to my mind at least, is that the truth will not yield or reveal itself if we persist with established religious paradigms of the day. For us, in our contemporary idiom, what that means is we cannot hope to stick to our established ways, conditioned ways of thinking and hoping for truth to reveal itself. So basically, what we need to do is find another way of thinking. And I think Guru Nanak provides that answer. What he is saying is, it is not, what you do, what you think, or how you do it. The fact is that any religious paraphernalia that you might engage in, because you remember he's talking about all the different rituals that people used to perform in his day. What he's basically saying to them is that all of this is unavailing in the absence of an inner sense of submission and surrender to the divine will. And this is the revolutionary, I think, contribution of Guru Nanak to Indian thought, because as far as I know, I don't think the notion of Hukam is present in Indian thought before Guru Nanak. And so it behooves us to really reflect and spend some time in thinking about this. So what Babaji is saying basically, after he's listed out all the different things that people do and pass off as religious ritual, soche sochna hoi and so on, you all know that Pankti. To my mind, what he is saying is that you don't really need this ritual or that ritual or an exclusive focus on any ritual. But what you need to do is to extend your consciousness and awareness of Hukam to include the actualities of your secular life as well. What that means is you can't compartmentalize your religious life with your secular life. This is an artificial barrier that between the religious and the secular in our lives that needs to give way to the presence of the sacred, the Hukam, in all human activity. So that, I think, is really the message in this Pauri. So let's talk a little bit more about Hukam and its origins and why I think it's teleological. So the word Hukam, as you all know, is of Persian Arabic origins and means, either order or writ or decree or will, command. But what Guru Nanak has done is that he has invested it with a metaphysical and spiritual connotation, which, as I said a little while ago, has no equivalent in Indian thought. Here, Hukam is pointing to an order that organizes and controls the entire life process. All sentient life is brought forth by Hukam. It governs our moral and ethical worlds. It determines the cause and effects of our actions, all in that body. Status and achievement, sorrow and happiness, union and separation and events of people, all of that is Hukam, which is, if I had to sort of put it in a nutshell, would say that it is a creative or regulatory agency that operates at all levels of our existence. So my thought, and I share this with you, is I have been thinking about Hukam from the perspective of the Big Bang on the one hand, and on the unfolding of human history on the other. I have often thought about this and spoken to some friends, and I share this with you. This is obviously my thought, and I would be interested in your thinking because it's helped me think a little bit about Hukam. So I feel that Hukam is the intersection between the Nirgun aspect of God and the Sargun, and that Hukam is the revelation of the Nirgun in time and space. So at a very primal level, it's the creation, the Big Bang as we know it. And so it runs and orders the world. But also at the level of human affairs, it is the unfolding of the spirit in history. This is a Hegelian thought for those of you who are familiar with Hegel, but I've found it very appealing. So I feel that Hukam is actually unraveling the spirit in this world. It's manifesting itself in this world through evolution, through history, and through all aspects of life. So my first pause here is, what is my purpose in life? I have, at least in my mind, concluded that it is a generic, larger purpose that I have to submit to. There is a larger purpose that is generic for all of us. And what might that be? It is to come to the realization that you have to live beyond your own narrow concerns. That, to me, is the first thing that I discovered as I wrestled and tried to understand Japji, is Hukam is that larger purpose. Now, obviously, Hukam doesn't lend itself to any easy understanding at an individual level, but I think if we can grasp the idea that Hukam is the larger generic purpose, that we have a role to play in it as individuals, it would help us to kind of grasp this idea. And the third bullet that you see here is there for a reason. I can't quote to you the tuk offhand, but there is a suggestion by Guru Arjan Dev Ji, Panjve Paatshah, which seems to suggest that the course of evolution has reached a point where it needs us as humans, which is the only self-conscious species, to actually help and aid in the process of being creators with the divine. That seems to me to be our individual purpose, that we have this obligation to understand that there is a larger purpose that we should all live for, which immediately shifts your paradigm. It shifts you away from your own narrow selfish purpose. And then the second aspect of it is you have a responsibility to move this forward. And how do you do that? It could be, and it obviously has to be played out in your own life. And how does that happen? Well, it could be as little as helping a friend, helping your parents. In other words, looking beyond your own tummy is what I think how it plays out in our individual lives. And I talk about where is the intersection. And if you notice the two words that I have there, love and creativity. We all know that for us, Waheguru is love manifested. And if you look at his manifestation in the universe, it is one of absolute creativity. It is constantly, forever creative. Sahib Mera Neet Nawa is an expression that we are familiar with, which means that at any given moment, it is creative. So it seems to me that our intersection in trying to understand our purpose in life is to be guided by these two railings, love and creativity. What that means for us individually is that our lives must be centered in love and they must be creative. So let's move on to the next slide here. The illusion of conscious will. Essentially, I have the title here from a book that I was reading not too long ago, which I found very interesting. And the title of the book was The Illusion of Conscious Will, written by an Indiana University professor of psychology. It's quite an academic book. But, you know, I found it interesting because what he said was what you think, when you make a decision, an executive decision, you do have the feeling that you willed it. But the fact of the matter is that the decision is already made at a deeper level and you're not even aware of it. So when it appears to you as a decision, what you're really doing is simply arranging the facts. And that, in fact, is what is happening. And I found that very interesting because I was interested in, you know, how far does our will go and where are the limits of this will? And I thought that you would find it interesting as well. And the tuk I have from Japji Sahib here is Nanak hukme je bujhe ta hau mein kahe na koe. So here is a symbiotic relationship between Hukam and Haume. What exactly prevents our discernment of Hukam in the first place? Babaji calls it a wall of falsehood, kurdi bal, that obscures our vision. And if we explore Japji a little bit, we'll discover, much to our surprise, that the wall of falsehood that is really a metaphor for us, for ourselves. We are our own worst enemies. And the term that he uses is haume, which is really, difficult to explain in English, because to my mind, we conventionally understand it to be ego or self-centered pride, or a sense of I or pride. But I think that neither of this really expresses the meaning of haume. And I don't know that this is the time for us to parse this word, but let's just agree that it's very difficult to find an equivalent in the English language that actually explains haume. And for the reason, and I'll share with you why I think that is so. Because haume, the way it is used in Gurbani, has a bipolar connotation. It has two connotations. At the one end, it stands for our individual experience of I, which you could say comes closest to the Western meaning of the ego. But that's not the only connotation it has. At the other end of the spectrum, from the individual to the cosmic, it is actually the cosmic principle of individuation, or the principle of diversity. If you read the Asadiwar, it tells you, haume kar kar jantu paya. This is in fact the process of creation itself. So this bipolar connotation that haume has is not something that you can find an English word for. So that's why I think that we should continue to use terms that are very exclusive to the way that our gurus have used them. So I will use haume here. Now, haume is what I think of as our cultural DNA. You know, we have a biological DNA, and I'm no biologist or a medical person, but just a lay person with an interest in this. It sets the limits for you. Your biological DNA kind of gives you the guards within which you have to work, and those are your limits. Similarly, I think that there is the notion of a cultural DNA. I forget the name of the biologist who popularized this term some years ago, called means, cultural means. But the idea here is that just like you have a biological DNA, you have a cultural DNA, and that comes from your conditioning, your education, your environment, and so on. So that too is something that is stamped on top of us and very difficult to break, if not impossible. So the fact of the matter is that haume is really a delusionary structure. It doesn't have its own structure. It doesn't have a center, and that is why it kind of creates issues for us. But haume is the big barrier to understanding Hukam. I think I've been talking for a few minutes. If I haven't seen any questions, so if I don't, I think if it's okay with you, I'll just continue to. Oh, I see some questions here. I'll stop. There is a question from Balwinder Singh from Tustin, California. Not thinking of us co-creators boost our ego and sense of duality, of being different and separate from God, having a separate will which is separate from the will of God. Balwinder Singh ji, I would say just what I pointed out right now, that it is an illusionary thing, that our will really is a delusional structure, for one thing. So it has really no real existence. The way I would answer your question is, I see it as a necessary tool that we need to navigate in the world of time and space. In attending to our affairs, you need to have some kind of an identity of sorts to be able to navigate from one place to another, or navigate with one individual to another. But if you unpeel this, what will you find at the end of it? Nothing. There really is nothing there. if you unpeel your conditioning. So that's what I mean by the fact that it is really a delusional structure, has no reality, but that's what we cling on to. So if we take the notion that we are really living here as servants to this divine will, you will see that there isn't a sense of duality. We just have some sort of identification to work with. So I hope that kind of addresses some of your question here. I have a question here coming from Sukhneet Singh in Minneapolis, but I can't read the question.
Let me go ahead and present that. So Sukhneet Singh has a question. What are some of the examples of implementation? For instance, our duties to act on our environmental challenges.
Can you say that again?
Sure. So what are some of the examples of the implementation? For instance, our duties to act out on our environmental challenges.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say that the way I have sort of at least tried to understand it and learn it is, if I see myself as nothing more than an instrument of this hukam, or this expression of the divine expressing itself through time and space, then it becomes my responsibility, my dharam, to act responsibly in all ways. And that brings us to what you're asking about, the implementation to the challenge of our environment. You see, that is, how do we act responsibly in dealing with the larger environment? How do I look? So I think at an individual level, at least the way I have thought about it is, you know, how big of a carbon footprint do I want to leave? What is responsible for me? How much consumption should I be making? What really is the right level for me? Those are the sorts of things that I think of when I think about, you know, how this plays into the environment. I hope that response, that answers your question. But feel free to engage me if that doesn't. There's a question from Gitanjali Singh from New Haven. The question is, how can helping parents or family members be seen as larger than self? The family is an integral part of us, so not outside of us, and therefore may not necessarily the larger context that forms Hukam. I am going to assume that I've understood your question here. If I haven't, please correct me. I think what I'm trying to say here is looking beyond your own narrow selfish interests, and believe me, there are people who do not even think about their parents in this world. We know of legions of stories where people do not even exert that responsibility. So I think that this whole notion that they're a part of us, I think is a good idea, but if you look around you, I see a lot of instances where even parents are neglected, friends are neglected, because we are too self-absorbed. Another one from Jyoti Singh from San Antonio. I can't see the question. Gurvinder?
Sure. The question is, can you please elaborate or explain more on how Hukam is realized through love and creativity?
If you will bear with me, a couple of slides down, we are going to talk about it. Perhaps I will talk about it right now. Hukam, love, and creativity. Now, there are certain terms that we would have come to, but we can talk about them here in Japji that I have picked on, and I've picked on because I think it is key to understanding Hukam. So, one key term is Amrit Vela. The other key term is Guru. The third key term is Suniye. And in Suniye, in that discussion, we would talk about Naam. Okay. So now, if you view Gurbani, there is a symbiotic if not a synonymous relationship between Naam, Hukam, and Shabad. Although in Gurbani, Naam never appears as Guru, Shabad does, but there is a symbiosis between these. These notions and connotations are overlapping connotations. So if you look at Naam, and Naam specifically, there is a tuk which I can't sort of recall off the top of my head, but it actually says that Hukam and Naam are the same thing. So if you walk from that logic, if you talk from that logic, Naam is love, and Naam is also the creative principle. If you look at Asa Diwar, Api ne aap sajyo, Api ne rachyo naam, Dui kudrat sajji, in that passage, you get the sense that Naam, and in many others, that Naam is the bridge between the Nirgun, between God and us. He created Naam. I see it as the blueprint, and I see it as the creative principle that runs through existence. And that is what we need to tap into as individuals, because it runs through us as well. Since I can't tell whether, I can't see you nodding your head, I'm just going to assume that I have, at least to some degree, responded to your question. So we'll move on to, so we've talked a little bit about Haume being the barrier to understanding Hukam. And I'm going to go to the next slide here, because here we will talk about, actually it's about the Guru as the guide, coach, and mentor. And the reason I bring up Guru is because you all, I think most of you are very aware of this fact, so I wouldn't want to sort of beat on this point. The fact of the matter is that the way to align with Hukam, and by extension connecting to the Hukmi, or the God behind Hukam, we need to figure out what the way is. How do we do that? And in SikhRI, the Guru is the portal through which communication with Naam is made possible, and by extension, Hukam. Okay, so now there are passages in Japji where Babaji has addressed the Guru also as a primordial Guru, as Gurmukh. You know, he says Gurmukhanathan, Gurmukhavedam. Here he's addressing the Guru to be, you know, God himself. So again, it's difficult to get into a detailed or too deep of a discussion of Guru, but the fact of the matter is that the notion of the Guru is very important to understand, that it is through the Guru that we are going to find our connection. The directional goal for everyone is to go through that portal that we call the Guru. And there are several meanings or shades of meanings to the word Guru. As I said a moment ago, there's a spectrum. And there are multiple terms in the Guru Granth Sahib for Guru. You know, there's Guru, Sadguru, Gurudev. So there are subtle differences, but at the end of the day, they're the same. And so the Guru has been used for God. The Guru has been used for Shabad, which means sound. Now, sound itself cannot teach you anything, but in our dimension, time and space, sound is negotiated through speech, through language, through knowledge. So the Guru Granth Sahib is being negotiated for us so that we can interact with it at this domain, through speech, through language, through understanding, and so on. So the Guru has a wide spectrum, but I like to think of the Guru as being available to me as knowledge, Gyan. I think that is the way that I can attach to the Guru. And for me, that knowledge is available to me, not specifically in the Guru Granth Sahib, of course, but Gurbani is all around us as well. I'm trying to see I think that I like the fact that you're asking me questions, which means you're paying attention. Okay, I don't see another question. So let me move on to the next slide here. Actually, I'm on it already. So what does the Guru teach you, basically, when you, and please bear in mind that I'm trying to keep all of this within the confines of Japji, because I think just within the Japji Sahib you will, find sort of a lot of these answers. And so the question is, what does the Guru do? And the answer is Suniye, which are the stanzas in Japji Sahib. Suniye, Suniye. It literally means by listening, and it refers to a specific art of attentive listening. Now, this is an art that Sikhs must cultivate in order to actually acquire this knowledge. Listening is very transformational. We do not pay enough attention to listening because the listening that we practice is very selective, it's very self-serving, it's very conditioned. We like to hear our own echo. I mean, I'm talking, I love hearing my own voice. Any sound, word, or speech that reinforces my sense of myself is very acceptable. Any disagreement or criticism, well, that's quite another matter. So the kind of listening we do is really not the kind of listening Suniye that the Guru is trying to point to us. It's attentive listening. So it's not passive, inattentive. It is not shrouded by inner chatter that we usually have in our minds. It is a whole different form of, it's very dynamic, requires an open mind, and it is also the term that we use for Simran. I see a question come through. I can't see Sean Lynch's question.
Oh, let me go ahead and present that. So Sean has a question from Carlsbad, California. Is an example of Hukam defending those treated unjustly and protect them? What limits, if any, should we place on ourselves in this? Is this contentious, oppressed in this contentious, repressed, and oppressed world?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure that I can give you a satisfactory answer for you, but because you've asked me about what limits, and limits is a difficult thing, but should we stand up and fight for justice? Absolutely. Absolutely. That is, as I said earlier, Guru Nanak is an absolute, I think, I mean, I often say this to my Sikh friends as well, that we really have not begun to understand how revolutionary Guru Nanak is, because he has turned Indian society upside down. But the fact is, the sad fact is that we have essentially just sort of, lumped him along with a whole lot of other mystics. We refer to him as a mystic, as a reformer, a passive kind of fellow who went about telling people to love each other. That is all well and good. That is the basis. But Hukam, Hukmi, speaks to, when we do ardas to Bhagavati, which is a double-edged sword. One of the meanings of that double-edged sword is justice. And that justice is to be achieved through the purposes of Hukam. So absolutely. And so the question is, so I think the caution here is that, and we will come to those slides in a minute or two, the caution is that we cannot claim to know Hukam without actually practicing and cultivating a certain lifestyle. And I'll come to that in a minute. So the first dimension of that lifestyle is attentive listening. Suniye dukh paap ka naas. This is an absolute must, and I would say to you that in common parlance, this is referred to as Naam Japna, Naam Simran. Again, it was not my intention to get into a discussion of what Naam Japna and Naam Simran is, but the fact of the matter is that Suniye, Mane, Man Kita Pao are very critical, crucial passages in the Japji Sahib. In fact, they take up quite a few, I think about 1/3, if not more, of the entire Japji is in fact devoted to the art of attentive listening. I would urge each one of you, when you go away from here, to really reflect on the art of attentive listening, what it means, what its transformational power is, and what it can do for you. I mean, you know, Guru Nanak Dev Ji is saying, Suniya dukh paap ka na, suniya tartavalak. I mean, he is actually telling you, you can get the ultimate knowledge by just attentive listening. So this is a very key point, and one of the things that Sikhs must pay attention to. So coming to Atam Ki Rahat, this is, I call this cultivating the inner soil, because you cannot begin to understand Hukam without actually cultivating what I call the inner soil. Now, you're all familiar with these passages. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but these are qualities, virtues that an ideal person in SikhRI has to cultivate. And references to an ideal person in SikhRI have come to us through various terms. They're, you know, in the very first 40, Kiv Satyar is one. Gurmukh, Sant, Bhagat, Gursikh, Jan, Sevak, Brahmgyani. I mean, those are all synonymous terms. So these are the qualities. Panch is another one. It's just come to mind. Panch Parvan, Panch Pradhan. These are the qualities that have to be cultivated in order to be acceptable in the court of the Almighty. Absolutely. So there are things that Sikhs have to do. So when you cultivate these inner virtues, what it does is it gives you purity of motive, because your motives have to be pure. It gives you integrity of action. You know you're not doing this just because there is something in it for you, but you're doing it because it's right. And it gives you, very importantly, it gives you the autonomy to transcend dogma. Manne mag, na chale panth. Another very important thing to remember, you learn how to transcend dogma. You're not dogmatic. And I think more and more of us tend to become very dogmatic. But it also enables you to exceed and transcend any materialistic bias that you might have. And most importantly, what happens when we are engaged out of Haumen? We become narcissistic. We're always looking at ourselves. So this enables you to transcend that narcissistic self-obsession. So a Gurmukh who cultivates attentive listening and cultivates the inner soil, what happens to him? He pulls away from established mental patterns. If you remember, we talked about established conditioning, established, way of doing things. This enables you to pull away from it. I mean, outwardly, you're doing the same things. You're running you may be a businessman, a doctor, a professor, whatever. You're doing the same things. But inwardly, a very different consciousness is at work now. A Gurmukh doesn't just live simply for individual goals at this point, okay? But he's now truly committed to a higher or larger purpose. And with that, I'll come to the next slide, which is one of the last slides. I think I got that wrong here. Yeah, here it is. This I call the alchemy. I like the notion of an alchemy, and this refers to the very last pauri in Japji Sahib, Jak Pahara Tiraj Sunyar. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. I could read this over and over again and again. But The essence of the Japji is in this body. The methodology is in this body. The way to become a Gurmukh is in this body. And, you know, I've again sort of listed some of the toolbox which overlaps with the previous screen. But the fact of the matter is, it is through this development that you are climbing the inner mountain, the stages. I didn't talk about the khans, but, you know, the khans are the realms that we need to traverse, metaphorically speaking, of course. That is the journey that we have to take into our inner core. And, you know, Babaji talks about 5 khans, not the place here to really get into those discussions, but the fact of the matter is that through attentive listening, through Sone, Mane, Man Kita Bhao, you walk through these 5 khans, and then he talks in the end about the allegory of a goldsmith using an alchemical process to transform baser metals to gold. Here, the message for us is to transform our psychological lead, which is haume, to spiritual gold, which is to become a Gurmukh. And of course, you know, he talks about restraint, patience, discernment, inner fire, and resolve. These are the qualities that you begin to cultivate. You know, restraint here meaning focus. Patience is obviously a prerequisite if you want to achieve anything of any significance. You know, patience has always been the underpinning of all creative work, and all civilization rests on that. You have to have discernment, which is a very Christian term that I've used, but I think it describes the search for one's true vocation, which is where purpose comes in. What exactly is my true vocation, and what has God built for me? And here, you know, the mind is described as the anvil, and discernment and mat, vivek, basically will reveal to you what Hukam has in store for you. And those were some of my thoughts that I wanted to share with you on the notion of purpose, but I want to finish off this discussion with the very last one that I have here, which is the socially active renunciate. Again, the title of a book that I have borrowed because I think it is very apt to how Sikhs should be thinking. The title of the book comes from a book written by a pair of people here, and they were talking about Guru Nanak's conversations with the Nath yogis, specifically the Nath yogis, and you know how that conversation has been captured in the Siddh Ghosh, and it's also been captured in Paudis, I believe it's 28 through 31 in the Japji Sahib, where, you know, Munda Santokh, Sarampat Choli, that conversation. But the fact of the matter is, and when I say that Guru Nanak is a true revolutionary and we owe it to him as our Guru to understand exactly what he is trying to tell us, he is not asking us to withdraw as passive mystics into some cave. He is in fact asking us to be very radical, be radically involved in changing the structure of the society that you live in. And that, I think, is the culmination that you find in Guru Gobind Singh's Khalsa. So I will stop at this point and invite any more questions. So basically what I have said to you is that in looking to purpose in life, Hukam is the first place to stop and understand that there is a generic purpose that is larger than all of us put together, and we refer to it as Hukam. We are in the service of that Hukam. So at a generic level, that is the purpose for all of us. Every one of us has that purpose. We have to be servants of Hukam. And at another level, we have to work with ourselves. I can't tell you what your individual small purpose might be in the sort of, you know, sandbox that you live in out of force. I mean, that's the way we were created. We talked about the fact that Haume is also the process of creation. So as long as we understand that, and as long as we control our Haume, I don't think it's a problem. But we have to wrestle and try and understand through attentive listening again, through the Guru, what exactly is in store for me. This is something that everyone, man, woman, has to do with themselves. Nobody, I believe, in my experience, I don't think anyone is going to be able to tell you that. So I won't even pretend to. With that, Vaheguru Khalsa, Vaheguru Fateh, and I'll invite questions.
Vaheguru Khalsa, Vaheguru Fateh. Thank you very much for the great presentation, Virji. I have a couple more questions from. Okay. Let me go ahead and begin with C.S. Singh. And the question is Naam, does it mean understanding?
I would put it to you this way. It could lead to true understanding. It could lead to true understanding of your authentic self. But if you look at the way Naam has been used in Gurbani, it is being used in many different ways. It is used as a noun, to refer to God himself. It has been used to describe the essence of everything. So, Naam is, it has been used in a way to describe, if you look at how we describe a class of things, just to use an example, if I say table being a class of things, then, well, there's different kinds of tables. There's, big tables, round tables, rectangular tables, and so on. But they're all tables. So that's their name. Similarly, Naam, especially Sat Naam, speaks to the essence of everything. So it's been used in that sense. So it's been used as God, it's been used as the essence of everything, and it has also been, as I said a moment earlier, as the creative principle of the Hukmi. It runs through, it creates everything. And Hukam, as I understand it, overlaps it. I see them as being somewhat synonymous, but it is, you can think of Hukam as being the agency through which it works, and we need to become agents of Hukam.
Thank you, Ji. I have another question from Dr. Charanjit Singh, and it says, how to break the barrier between Atma and Paramatma?
I will give you a very personal answer to this, and that is this. I do not see a barrier. I think the barrier is pretty much mental and man-made, Haume-made. We think there is a barrier, so therefore all at once there has to be a plan to get somewhere. So what I have learned through wrestling with some of these issues and trying to be a Sikh of the Guru, what I have learned is, at the end of the day, there really is no barrier. That Guru, that God is really working through me, and what I need to do from a Haume perspective is get out of the way. So that might answer your question. Just get out of the way. Don't let your Haume sit in the middle.
That's a good segue into the next question, Ji. From Sukhneet Singh, and it says, sometimes I feel as though attentive listening means not giving my opinion or contributing my own words. What do you think?
Oh, okay. Very good. Very good. When I speak about attentive listening, the context, I should have made that clear. I can quite understand your confusion. I'm not here talking about, attentive listening as you would have in your normal domain, okay? When we talk about Naam Simran, you have to remember that Guru as Gyan is not the Gyan of economics or physics or any intellectual Gyan. That has its place, and you should speak up and express your opinions. The Gyan that we are talking about here requires a different faculty. It doesn't require your head, your brain, your intellect. In fact, what it requires is that you go past your thought process, because there is a lot of inner chatter inside of us, and that is what prevents you from seeing your authentic self. Your authentic self simply is Waheguru inside of you. I think of it as uninterrupted consciousness within you. In order for you to get to that uninterrupted consciousness, you have to stop the interruptions. And what might be the interruptions? The interruptions are simply your own thought processes. All of this inner dialogue that we are constantly having in our heads. So the attentive listening that I am talking about requires a different mystical surt. You know, it is a different faculty altogether. And it is the cultivation of that faculty along with the process. So the process and the end and the tool, they're all wrapped into one. So yeah, I mean, there is a distinction there. I mean, I would not encourage you to not express your opinions in day-to-day life, but when you do practice attentive listening, you have to let go of your own thought processes. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Ji. Also, there was a request from Jyoti Singh on seeing the slide number 8 one more time, and a question which is, can you recommend any books or literature to help better understand Japji, Hukam, and purpose?
Well, I can, you know, I mean, we've all read the old standard books. I will tell you this. I'm a little uncomfortable giving you books to understand Hukam, because at least from what I have read in the English language, not much of it is very satisfying, which is one reason I sort of decided that I was going to try and get to the bottom of it myself. Not that I will get to the bottom of it. But then, you know, I would say Kapoor Singh is one person that I have read with a great deal of respect. I would certainly read Kapoor Singh. I would recommend certain essays written by Dr. I.J. Singh, who's also presented here. He speaks in a very contemporary idiom, and a lot of the ideas that I'm sharing with you was shared with another group on another forum called the Talking Stick, and we had an absolutely thrilling discussion around some of these things. Now, having said that, I will say this to you, that at the end of the day, I would invoke Guru Amar Das Ji to you. Man ki patri vachiye pai. What you have to read is the slate of your own mind. Man jeete jag jeet. That is where this is all at. It is not really the accumulation of intellectual knowledge. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Ji. The only other question I see from Balwinder Singh in Tustin, California again is, what exactly does the Shabad Guru mean?
You know, I'm no authority, so when I give you all of these answers, I want you to recognize that these are just the thoughts of another Sikh like yourselves. So please bear that in mind. But coming to your question, you know, we talked about Sabad, Naam, and Hukam having somewhat synonymous meanings, and Sabad referring to sound, the primal sound. What Guru Nanak Dev Ji says, Sabad Guru Surtun Chela here means is that you need to bring your awareness to this Shabad that is resonating in all creation. Okay, now, on the face of it, it doesn't mean much to me. I mean, I don't know where it is. I don't know how to get there. The next best thing to think about Shabad is, as I said earlier, it has to be negotiated at a plane where you and me can make sense of it. So that Shabad Guru is further decomposed, if you will, for people like us who are living a three-dimensional existence, who can actually read who can look at the symbols. If you look at Guru Granth Sahib, it is nothing more than symbols that have some very deep attached meanings to them, right? That's what scripture is. So what I would say Shabad Guru is, make that your Guru. The knowledge inherent in those symbols is what your Guru is. And the way to get to that knowledge is to start engaging with that Guru as Guru. So in the beginning, you might just look at the very literal meanings of the word, which is fine, which is where we all begin. But once you start practicing that reading, once you start practicing attentive listening, once you start cultivating your own inner soil, you will find that those symbols on the pages of the Guru Granth Sahib will jump at you. They will change you. They will actually transform you. And I can personally guarantee that for you, provided your engagement is an honest one. So I can tell you, I did not know how to read Punjabi up until 20, 25 years ago, and I wanted to do it. All I did was an ardas, and I started to read in whatever way I could. And the Guru steps forward and actually helps you. So that would be my message to you.
Ajit, thank you very much. I don't see any questions, just comments saying yes, it was very helpful.
I do want to take the opportunity again to say thank you to all of you. I know how busy our routines are, how busy our schedules are, but I appreciate the fact that you took time to come and actually hear me. I'm hoping that some of what I have said are experiences that you have had in your own personal lives, and hoping that some of what I have shared here will be meaningful to you, and that you will continue to have this exchange with other Sikhs as well. Waheguru Khalsa, Waheguru Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I must thank Ravinder Singh for a very informative session, and all the audience for their participation to make it very interactive. So thank you very much, everyone. I will go ahead and close down the session. At the end, you will see a feedback survey. Please help us to improve future sessions, and we will look forward to your participation in future Liv webinars. Thanks once again, and Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.